Hello and welcome to another episode of the Paolo Investor. Today is the 3rd of November 2025, a Monday. And as I make this video, Bitcoin's at 106, Ethereum at 3.6K, Kaspa about 4.7 cents. And today what we'll be talking about is doing a deep dive into Kaspa. What I see are the different scenarios that occur from this point onwards and how I think is the best way to try and play this game. So that being said, this is not financial advice, so do your own research, and let's get on with it. So Kaspa has been seeing some rather weak price action lately, right? And that is the consequence of what we've been seeing in the entire market. So let's take a look at Kaspa. This is sort of the graph of Kaspa colored by the PAI. The PAI is an index from 0 to 1. The closer it is to 0, the bluer it is. And the bluer it is, the better opportunity it is to buy. Mathematically, the risk is lower. And the redder it is, the closer it is to 1, mathematically, the risk is higher. And so it's a hotter time and you have to be more careful, right? That's sort of the metric. And the way the PAI works is that it's a causal asset, meaning that it's looking only at the information that it is available to that point. So if we're looking at the Kaspa value, the PAI value in the 5th of May 2024, it only has the values of Kaspa before that time onwards, right? So it's learning only from its past history, and I'm not coloring it based on what I know is going to happen in the future. I know it now, but at that point, of course, I wouldn't know. So these are real-time values, right? Values that are dependent upon the past because that's how the algorithm is learning, but not giving the algorithm the ability to look in the future and say, oh, this is what the price would have been looking back in 2025 today, right? And so these are the values that we would be getting in real time. And I developed this system because the power law that Kaspa had been following sort of deviated significantly from that around, July, September, June 2024. And I wanted some other way to try and make better decisions and judgments on Kaspa. Now, as you can see, the signal gave us low Kaspa values in October when the price was around 10 cents. And then it gave us low values again when it was 6 cents. But it had learned previously what it was from how the Kaspa had behaved previously, right? So the more the time goes on, the better it understands how this particular asset has its volatility and deviations. And so it learns from that, right? So it gets better and better as time goes on. And in respect for that, right now we are below the 0.1 level. And the 0.1 level is a price level, right? But what we're saying here in terms of time is that Kaspa has, at 0.1, Kaspa has been at this level or lower in its history to date, about 10% of the time or so, 8.9%, right? So right now, let's say if you decided to buy Kaspa, you're buying it at the lowest 8.9% of values or so, right? I think the value is 0.094 or so. So roughly about the lowest 10% of values. And so typically, if you look at this, the PAI has been pretty good at calling major bottoms, right? Even though longer term, it may rise and then crash to a bigger bottom from where it had been previously called. The algorithm is learning as it is. But generally, when it gets really dark blue, it's generally a localized bottom of some kind. And as time goes on, it becomes more and more of a global bottom because it figures out, hey, this is all the stuff I've seen in the past, and now I know that this is as bad or as good as things get, and it learns more and more. But what we have to take into account is that we don't have necessarily a full cycle's worth of data, right? Kaspa is still a relatively young asset. We have about 1,100 days or so of data, unlike Bitcoin, in which you've got 5,000, almost 6,000 plus days of data at this point, right, from 2009 onwards. So we have to be respectful of the fact that it hasn't locked down on the complete history till yet. But if we are looking at Kaspa and we are saying, okay, this looks like an algorithm that's doing a really good job of calling the bottoms, which I think it is, you can see that the zero value is about 3.7 cents or so. And that means that would be the lowest values that it has seen to date, right, for Kaspa. Not in absolute terms, but based on what the history of Kaspa has been, along with all its different trends and things. So I think where we are right now, that is probably about the worst case scenario that I think things get in, right? And I want to show that to you from a couple of different perspectives. So this is the PAI reading, right? And if you look at Kaspa versus Bitcoin, it's been in a decrease all the way down from, about, when is this? From February 24 onwards. If you look at, we peaked around November 23. Bitcoin has gone up, Kaspa has gone out, so the ratio has swung out quite a bit, right? But if you look at the altcoin market as a whole, you can kind of see that we have been in a downtrend as it is, right? So if this is about 24 November, 24 or so around here, we've still been in this downtrend. Yeah, we had a jump up, but then we stopped dropping down again. And what we can also, and based on this, if you believe in the 4-year cycle and you believe that things rhyme and you believe that things repeat, this is okay. So this is total 3 minus USDT minus USDC. So it's the amount of the altcoin, the capital, the market cap of the altcoins minus stable coins divided by Bitcoin, right? So it gives a ratio between how much monetary energy is in the altcoins versus Bitcoin. And the lower it goes, the stronger is Bitcoin relative to the altcoin market. So if you're looking for alt season, you want this to be taking off, long and short of it. If you think that history repeats, and oftentimes we've been talking about the 4-year cycle, and that seems a reasonable way to proceed, it went down all the way to 0.18, and right now it's at about 0.32. That's about a 30% decrease in the altcoin market cap relative to Bitcoin, right? If that were to happen, you'd be looking at roughly about a 30% decrease if you believe that, we're going to fall in that same zone that we did before, right? That would be about here or so. So that's about a 30% drop over here. If you look at the Kaspa analysis, we're about 4.6 cents right now. A 30% price decrease would get us to roughly about 1.2 cents below that. So it would roughly get us about 3.4 cents, 3.5 cents, which is pretty close to what the PAI is also indicating, right? The PAI dynamically adjusts, and it's a finer measure. But if you want to use how much the altcoin have dropped relative to Bitcoin in the past, and said, hey, if Kaspa follows that same sort of drop, you could be looking at a 30% drop from where we are now. That's sort of a worst case scenario. And I'm showing you this because there are two independent measures, the PAI and sort of this what happened last time analysis, right? Even though the PAI does have some of that memory, but it doesn't have that memory because it wasn't around. Kaspa wasn't around when this happened in January 21. So these are two independent mechanisms that are saying, hey, this looks like a worst case scenario. And furthermore, if you do a PAI analysis on actually this same measure, total 3 minus USDT minus USDC, you can see that it's calling the bottom should be around 0.19. I don't know whether it's clear over here or not, but it's saying the zero value for this particular distribution, which is, again, the altcoins divided by Bitcoins, should come to a minimum of around 0.19, right? Which is pretty close to what we're getting over here, which is 0.187. Those numbers look fairly close to me. And so we have these three independent measures that are calling for how bad it could get in a worst case scenario. Now, let me be clear that I am not saying that this is what's going to happen, but it's what we've already seen in the past. And we now have multiple points of reference that are saying this is as bad as it could get. So what is my takeaway from this? And what is my takeaway from this? The takeaway is that we could have a bigger drop underneath, but based on this, we're in the bottom 10% of these values over here, in the bottom 10% of time that we've spent there, right? Because this is time in the PAI zone. Doesn't mean we can't get the 30% drop, but it's the bottom 10% of the time. So you got to figure out what your strategy here is, and you got to figure out how much you already are exposed to the market or how exposed I am. For me right now, I have a very small exposure to Kaspa, right? And for that reason, I would be looking at potentially buying were we to drop in this zone. That would be sort of a bottom fishing approach, right? And I would only deploy a small position of whatever I allocate to Kaspa around that, because again, this is a young asset, right? And we don't know what happens. We're assuming that things only get as bad as they did last time. And that might not be the case. They could get worse, relatively speaking. And how could that happen? Well, Bitcoin already has dropped very recently, right? You can just see that Bitcoin dropped 7% in the last 7 days, but Kaspa dropped down by 18%. Fartcoin is down 33%. So you can see a small drop in Bitcoin causes a disproportionately large drop in the altcoin market. Of course, it also works the other way around, right? As Bitcoin shoots up, the altcoins shoot up massively. And that's kind of the whole idea behind alt season. Well, Bitcoin is going to be taking off, and then everything else is going to follow in terms of the altcoin market. And so we can look at this and what happened last time, and you can start drawing your own assessment. If you look at the price of Bitcoin, we can see that the price of Bitcoin started taking off last cycle, but altcoins kept on dropping, and Bitcoin is already shooting up to a local peak. And then the altcoins started their big run up. And here's alt season, right? This was that massive run up all the way from 0.187 in terms of ratio all the way to up almost 1. You know, the altcoin minus tables was at the same level as Bitcoin in terms of market cap. So right now, what we are seeing with Bitcoin is sort of this awful price action, right? Bitcoin is down. It's this axis over here. And this blue line is Bitcoin, and we're down, right? And so how can the altcoins take off until Bitcoin has bottomed and then started taking off? Maybe it'll be completely different this cycle, but really we should be expecting things to more likely to repeat than completely come up with an independent wave. So I think there are a few different ways that you can play this. You can try and grab it right at the bottom, right around this value. Again, that's a risky approach, or we can talk about waiting for the altcoin market actually to start taking off, just like it did over here, before we start jumping in back into Kaspa with size. Right? And again, Kaspa may overperform the market, may underperform the market. We don't know of that, but it's not convincing right now that we've reached the bottom, and it's the absolute bottom of prices. So I wanted to share this with you guys because I wanted to give you the quantitative perspective that I use as a power law investor to understand where I think the market could go. Again, it's not predicting where the market is going to go, but where the market could go. And I want to have a plan for those different scenarios. And like I alluded to last time, when the price of Bitcoin starts taking off and the altcoins taking off, there'll be much more time to get into the altcoin market. And I definitely would miss the bottom in that case. But right now, with the amount of fear and the amount of uncertainty in the market, I'd rather be cautious, right? And that was one of the reasons why I decided to exit the market when I made that video a few weeks ago. I did get lucky on the timing, I'll be upfront about that, but that was kind of the logic behind there, is that, hey, I think it's a time to take risk off the table rather than be betting for those amazing life-changing gains. And so I hope that gives you sort of a triangulation of where the different things are. To summarize, I think that in the worst case scenario, we end up around this price from 3.7 cents or so, maybe a little lower. That is backed by what happened last time in the altcoin market relative to Bitcoin in terms of ratios. That indicates a 30% drop is possible if we were to drop to the same extent as last time. And if we did that and we assume that Kaspa follows the overall market, we could be looking at about a 30% drop, which would take us to about 3.5 cents or so, very close to what this number is, within 5-10% or so. And finally, when we run the PAI on the actual proportion of altcoin market cap divided by Bitcoin, the PAI is also indicating that we could, in the worst case scenario, fall to around 0.19, right? And we do have a fair degree of reliability on that one. 0.19 would get us again to about a 30% drop from where we are right now. So the long and short of it is, if you want to start buying Kaspa at this point and you think that it's a great opportunity, it's in the bottom 10% of the time that we have, but we could drop down another 25-30% or so. So have a plan for that. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. I want to see Kaspa succeed as much as you guys. But in this situation, it is better to be safer rather than sorrier. Be mostly in Bitcoin or cash and wait for that amazing opportunity. Maybe we will get it. And if we get it, I will definitely be buying some, but my overall strategy would be to wait for these prices to start taking off, just like they did last time, right? And that would only happen after Bitcoin starts taking off. So I think we first see Bitcoin taking off, likely making all-time highs like it did last time, and then the altcoin market will take off. And that's going to take some time. So we have plenty of time to get into Kaspa if and when that happens. And it may not happen. If it doesn't happen, it's good to remain in Bitcoin because that probably has the biggest amount of risk protection on the downside. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and do sign up for updates at powerlawinvestor.com. I'll see you on the next one.